Greetings. I happen to be giving this talk on November 11th of 2023. It happens to be, of course, a weekly Sabbath, and we're late in the 8th month on the sacred calendar. But in much of the world, November 11th is a special day of commemoration honoring veterans. In America, it's called Veterans Day. It used to be called Armistice Day. It was the anniversary of the conclusion of the First World War, which ended, the guns were silent, became silent at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. So we do salute today and honor our veterans. And people were hoping that First World War would be the war to end wars, but it actually was the beginning of a conflict which didn't really end until perhaps you could say the early 1990s. The actual war to end wars you can read about in Revelation 20. Because of the events taking place as I'm giving this talk, I've been sharing with my viewers the dark humor that Jews share with one another. And there's a story I heard, walking back from synagogue one Sabbath in my youth. A member of the Roma community in Eastern Europe, we used to refer to them as gypsies, decided that he never really had much of a religious background, and so he decided he was really going to study into Christianity and formally convert to Christianity. So he did it, and he walked out of church, and the first thing that happened was he saw a man who was obviously Jewish walking down the street, and he pounced on him and started beating up on him. Well, the policeman came and broke them up. He said, "What's going on here? Why did you? I saw you attack that Jew, gypsy. Why did you attack that Jew?" So he said, "Well, I was angry about the crucifixion." And so the policeman said, "Well, that happened 2,000 years ago." And the man said, "Yeah, but I just heard about it." Again, some of the dark humor that we would share with one another. I'm going to be talking about women today. So I thought I would, before I went into my talk, I want to read a couple of verses involving women in the Bible. I want to go to Psalm 86 and verse 16. Here the prayer is, "O turn to me and have mercy on me. Give your strength to your servant and save the son of your maidservant." What a blessing it is if you had a mother who was a servant of God. What a blessing. And then in Psalm 116, and also again in verse 16, O Lord, truly I am your servant. I am your servant, the son of your maidservant. But he goes on to say, you have loosed my bonds. As I speak today, we don't know the destiny, ultimately, of those who've been kidnapped in the land of Israel, who are now assumedly in Gaza as hostages. As I speak today, we don't know what is going to happen to them. So many of you have heard, and I want to echo and say amen to that recommendation. You've heard it said that you want to go and study Genesis 14. You want to go and study 1 Samuel 30. And after doing that, take the matter to God and pray in the name of Jesus Christ for the rescue of those hostages. I remember back on July 4th of 1976, I was in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and was able to find out about the rescue of the hostages at Entebbe. And you may recall that there was one Israeli soldier who died, who happened to be Yonatan Netanyahu, the older brother of the present Prime Minister of Israel. But that was a miraculous rescue. And at some point, some of you will be listening to this after you already know, what happened. At this point, we don't know what happened, so we continue to pray about that situation. And now I do want to talk about women in the wilderness. Women in the wilderness. So as you can imagine, my talk is going to be coming from the fourth book of the Pentateuch, the book of Bamidbar, in the wilderness, which is normally called by the Greek name, which is translated into English as Numbers. You know, there was a huge Greek-speaking Jewish community in Alexandria, so they had their names for the books. And so we in the English-speaking world, we normally know it as the book of Numbers. But it does cover the wilderness experience of the children of Israel. But before I go there, I want to go to Luke, the first chapter. And I want to talk about Miriam, the mother of Jesus Christ, also known as Maria, or English speakers, Mary. And of course, here we have the famous Magnificat, as it's called, based upon the first words of what she says. This is it's called here in my Bible the Song of Mary. And Mary said, this is Luke 1:46, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit has rejoiced in God my Savior." And of course you could read on. Mary's prayer here, her praise of God, seems to echo the words of Hannah. She was blessed with a son, and later on other children. But the first son she had promised to the Lord, and her son became Samuel, a great, actually a prophet in the history of God's people. But also it echoes a song of another Miriam, the first Miriam I read about in the Bible. And I want to talk about her because she was one of the women in the wilderness. But I first want to go to Acts, the 3rd chapter, and mention that we know, if we know the Bible, that in Deuteronomy 18, Moses actually prophesied about Jesus Christ. That Moses was in many ways a type of Christ. And in Acts 3 and verse 22, we see Peter talking about this. "For Moses truly said to the fathers, 'The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brethren. Him you shall hear in all things, whatever he says to you. And it shall be that every soul who will not hear that prophet shall be utterly destroyed from among the people.'" And by the way, he goes on to talk about Samuel in the next verse, which I already talked about Samuel. But here we see Moses, as I said, prophesied about Jesus Christ, and it's quoted here in Acts. And he was in many ways a type of Christ. And just as Jesus Christ had his mother Miriam, Moses had his older sister Miriam, who played a motherly role, you could say, in his life. She was not his mother, but she played a motherly role, as we'll see. I want to go back to the book of Exodus and to the 2nd chapter, reading about Miriam. And let's talk about what happened here after he was born and hid, and then finally, set out. I'm going to read verse 3, talking about his mother Yocheved. "But when she could no longer hide him," this is Exodus 2:3, "she took an ark of bulrushes for him, daubed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the riverbank. And his sister stood afar off to know what would be done to him." So now this is Miriam. "Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and her maidens walked alongside the riverside. And when they saw the ark among the reeds, when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. So she had compassion on him and said, 'This is one of the Hebrews' children.' Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, 'Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you?' And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Go.' So the maiden went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." Talking to his real mother. I'm not sure that it doesn't say that she knew that, but that's how it worked out. So the woman took the child and nursed him. I'm going to read one more verse here. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she did adopt the boy, the Pharaoh's daughter. And so he now is growing up as Egyptian royalty. So she called his name Moses, saying, "Because I drew him out of the water." I think there's a double meaning with Moses. From a Hebrew point of view, you could say it has to do with drawing him out of the water. From an Egyptian point of view, I think it would mean a child of unknown parentage, an adopted child. So anyway, that's a background. So here Miriam is very instrumental in arranging things really wonderfully for her younger brother. Now there was also between the two children there was yet another brother, and that was Aaron. Aaron was older than Moses. I want to go now to Micah 6 and verse 4 in the prophets, the so-called minor prophets. There's actually a reference there to Miriam. And in the 6th chapter of Micah and in verse 4. So if you want to go along with me there and see it for yourselves, or you can read it later. He says, "For I brought you up from the land of Egypt. I redeemed you from the house of bondage, and I sent before you Moses, Aaron, and Miriam." So Miriam did play a leadership role. She was, of the tribe of Levi, the sister of Moses and Aaron, and Moses' big sister, and she did play a leadership role. Particularly, it would see when you put it together, a leader among the women, a kind of matriarchal figure among the women. And we see that in Exodus 15. Remember, I talked about the song of Mary, or Miriam, and now we have the first song of Miriam, which was originally, of course, a song of Moses, and Moses sang it, and then evidently the Israelites repeated after him, and then Miriam did the same with the women of Israel. They have crossed the Red Sea. They've had the 10 plagues on the Egyptians. Now they've come out of bondage. They've crossed the Red Sea. They've seen that miracle, and then they've seen the sea crash down on the Egyptian army, wiping them out. So, of course, they're singing praises to God. In Exodus 15, then Moses, it should be then Moses sang, and the children of Israel. So I get the idea that it would maybe that Moses sang it and they repeated. And then Moses and the children of Israel sang this song to the Eternal and spoke, saying, "I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea." And of course you can continue on. And then I want to go a little further and go to verse 20. So now we come to verse 20. Then Miriam, the prophetess, okay, so she's one of the prophetesses of the Bible. Moses was a prophet. Miriam was a prophetess. Then Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, and here she's called the sister of Aaron. It's interesting that's how she's listed here. Aaron was the priest. We became the father of the priesthood, and he did have an important role to play. So Moses is talked about, and then Miriam is talked about as the sister of Aaron. It kind of reminds me of Jude. Talks about himself in the book of Jude as the brother of James, but he's also, I believe, the half-brother of Jesus Christ, as is James, but he calls himself Jude, the brother of James. So it's kind of similar here. Miriam, the prophetess, sister of Aaron, took the timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. So now the men have had their. Maybe this was happening kind of more or less at the same time. I'm not sure about all the logistics of how it worked out. And Miriam answered them, "Sing to the Eternal, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea." So it's very similar. So here we have this very powerful presence of Miriam here. But later on, Miriam gets involved with something very negative. And that involves now another woman in the wilderness, another of our women in the wilderness. And in order to talk about her, I want to go back to Acts, the 7th chapter. And I think I want around verse 22 or so. Let's go to the 7th chapter of Acts, this talk that Stephen gives before his martyrdom. And as I said, if you're reading along, I'm going to go to this 22nd verse of Acts 7. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and deeds. But, we're not told about them in the Bible. He's 40 years old, and then the action begins when he has to flee Egypt. So Josephus, the historian, writing at the end of the 1st century, tells us that Moses was a general, that he went down into Ethiopia, and could be what we call Sudan today, but down into the area, into that area inhabited by what we would call black Africans. He went down into that area, and he was besieging a city as an Egyptian general, and a princess, I guess, was on the ramparts and saw him, and just became, fascinated by him, and you could, you could say she fell in love with him, and so she offered Moses that if he would marry her, she would surrender the city. She was the princess of the city, she was the daughter of the ruler of the city, and so obviously that would be the humane thing to do, so he did it. He did marry her, and so he was able, in that sense, to peacefully subdue the city. Now, I can speculate reasonably that he would have been, let's say, around 38 at this time. I don't know why he never married. Maybe he married and his wife died, or maybe he just was so busy with his career he never married. But in her case, she was very likely very young, maybe about 16. So I'll call him 38 and I'll call her 16. So they marry. And he goes back to Egypt. Now, very possibly, the idea was she would eventually join him there. And so that would create an alliance between Egypt and her city. Well, before she gets a chance to join him there, he flees the country. He's in trouble and flees. He's 40, and he leaves. And he goes far away, of course, because he's in trouble. So when she gets to Egypt, if she does go there, she finds that he's missing. You don't know his whereabouts. So very possibly she goes home, and her father, who is the ruler of that city, probably dissolves the marriage. And you could say, in one sense, it was more of it's similar to what we might call an annulment, rather than an actual divorce. It's maybe more like what we might call an annulment. Anyway, meantime, Moses is in a world where polygamy is normal. He does take a wife in Midian. Now, it may be that he did eventually get word to this Ethiopian princess. Josephus calls her Tharbis, so I'll call her Tharbis. So it may be that eventually he did get word to Tharbis about what was going on with him, but he was obviously far, far away, and he had a very different life, and he wound up marrying Zipporah. So let's say that when he married, he was of course 40 when he left Egypt. He marries Zipporah, and let's say she's about 20. It's speculation, but let's say she's about 20. Now let's go 41 years later. 41 years later. Zipporah, I don't think you find any mention of her after Exodus 18. So it's possible she died roughly at the age of 60. So Moses is once again single, and we're 41. He's now 81 years old, the Israel is in the wilderness. We're in the book of Numbers. And very likely Zipporah has died. Now, meantime, back in Ethiopia, this princess very likely did marry, but very likely a man a good bit older than she, who is probably dead at this point. And so she's a widow. And by now she would have heard about what happened in Egypt. Wow. Yeah, so a lot of sensational events occurred. So she would have very likely had some knowledge of what went on. Now, if you look at a map, you see how you can usually go from Ethiopia up to the Red Sea and onto the Sinai Peninsula. So very likely she's now, let me see, 41 and 16 makes her, 57? So let's make her 57 years old. So now he's 81 and she's 57. It doesn't seem so drastic as when they first married, because he's, of course, a very sharp, active, very vital 81. If you were to meet him, you wouldn't think he's 81. So anyway, he's 81, she's 57. So she goes to the Sinai, and they get back together again. And so now she's with him, and very likely she's there. And then the years go by, and she dies, but he lives to all the way to be 120. Now that is a very logical scenario based on Numbers 12. I call it the greatest love story never told. I've never seen anybody, this would make a very fine novel or movie, but nobody ever does it. But I want to go to Numbers 12. Then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. Now, what was their objection? Very likely they thought of her as possibly a pagan, and she's not part of the covenant people, and so they objected to her marrying her. Now maybe she, like Ruth, agreed to be included under the covenant, but maybe they had their suspicions, and there also may have been some racial prejudice involved as well. It's possible, as I'll show you later on. Or it may even be that they felt that somehow, if you look at the Deuteronomy 24, that since she had been married to him and then the marriage dissolved and she had married someone else, that she couldn't go back to him. But as I said, I think technically, in his mind, I don't think he had necessarily ever formally divorced her. And in any case, I think that you could call the dissolution of that marriage maybe more of an annulment than an actual formal divorce. So I don't know if there was some technical problems involved. I will say, if you look at the movie The Ten Commandments, Cecil B. DeMille handled it as best he could, given the 1950s. He had a lady from UCLA whose stage name became Esther Brown. She played the part of Tharbus, and there's a kind of a hint that she had some kind of romantic relationship with Moses. You see that early in the movie. And later on, you see that when Moses' stepmother, who in the movie is still alive at the time of the Exodus, because the movie, has its, what's the right word? I'm trying to think of the term for that, but they fudge a bit with the account. Put it that way. There's what's it called? License? Anyway, so there's some term for it. So anyway, she comes back. The mother of stepmother of Moses comes back to Moses, and she wants to eat with him on the Passover night. And Aaron and Miriam get all upset. She worships the gods of Egypt. And she's an idolatrous woman and all this. And he calms them down and says, "Let her sit here. She's my mother or my stepmother. Let her sit here." And so, it may be that was a situation when he married an Ethiopian. They were suspicious of her. Or it may very well be, as I said, there may have been some racial prejudice involved. But in the meantime, they showed a certain envy for Moses' position. For Aaron to be that way was incredible. After the golden calf episode, you'd think he would keep a lower profile. But it seems like Miriam was more the instigator of it. Because when the punishment comes for their attack on Moses and their lifting up of themselves, when the punishment comes, it comes more on Miriam. Here God says, I'm quoting verse 6, then he said, hear now my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak to him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. Excuse me. I speak with him face to face, even plainly, and not in dark sayings. And he sees the Lord, the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? So the anger of the Lord was roused against them, and he departed. And when the cloud departed from above the tabernacle, suddenly Miriam became leprous, as white as snow. That's why I'm saying maybe racial prejudice was involved. And so he told him, if you object to the fact that his wife isn't white enough, now I'm going to make you very white. Miriam became leprous, as white as snow. Then Aaron turned toward Miriam, and there she was, a leper. So Aaron said to Moses, O my Lord, please do not lay this sin on us, in which we have done foolishly and in which we have sinned. So Aaron, of course, very quickly repents, but also he's concerned for his sister. So he does have a proper concern. Obviously, he's concerned about what may happen to him, but he's also concerned about his sister. And evidently, she was more the instigator of this. And it's too bad that happened. But the Bible does show the flaws of its characters as well as their strengths. Please do not let her be as one dead, whose flesh is half consumed when he comes out of his mother's womb. So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, please heal her, O God, I pray. You see Moses' attitude. Yeah, what a wonderful attitude he had about it. Then the Lord said to Moses, if her father had put spit in her face, would she not be shamed 7 days? Let her be shut out of the camp 7 days, and afterwards she may be received again. So Miriam was shut out of the camp 7 days, and the people did not journey till Miriam was brought in again. And afterward the people moved from Haseroth and camped in the wilderness of Paran. So Miriam, unfortunately, seemed to be the instigator of this. Aaron went along. She was punished, but then she was brought back, and from that point on, evidently, things seemed to be stable among the three of them: Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. And of course, Aaron, in the 18th chapter of Numbers, he's promised a permanent, a covenant, a priesthood, which it continues to this day, the Aaronic priesthood. And then we have in Numbers 20, verse 1, and the children of Israel, the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed in Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there. And so Miriam died in that area and didn't enter the promised land. Neither did Moses, neither did Aaron. And I talked about Moses not entering the promised land. I talked about that a week or two ago. And Aaron doesn't enter the promised land, neither does Miriam. And maybe it was this episode as to why she didn't enter. Maybe that episode in Numbers 12 is the reason why she doesn't enter the promised land. But she overall, does have a positive record, but unfortunately she does have that problem. She was punished, and she evidently got back on track, and she dies, and there, and she dies as a respected leader of women in that, and evidently in that community. But again, she doesn't enter the promised land. On the other hand, so we have Miriam and we have Tharbis, two women in the wilderness. I want to talk about 5 more in one group, 5 sisters. And those are the daughters of Zelophehad. And it's quite interesting what happens to them. I'm in Numbers 27 and verse 1. And I want to talk about the daughters of Zelophehad. Then came the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, from the families of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. And these were the names of his daughters: Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. Now I want to talk about this Noah. This is not the same word as Noah, the man Noah. That is Noach, Nun and Echet. And this is Noah, Nun Vav Ayin. And sometimes it's spelled in modern times as N-O-A. And they're opposite meanings. Noach has to do with rest or comfort, whereas Noah has to do with moving around, being very, quivering and wiggling and so on. So they're very different meanings. But anyway, so these are the 5 daughters, and the problem was that there was no male heir. Okay, and yet their father wasn't a particularly wicked man. Why should I'm going to go to verse 4. Why should the name of our father be removed from among his family because he has no son? Give us a possession among our father's brothers. They asked a legitimate question, and there's no male heir. So Moses brought their case before the Lord, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "The daughters of Zelophehad speak what is right." So he supported their position. You shall surely give them a possession of inheritance among their father's brothers, and cause the inheritance of their father to pass to them. And you shall speak to the children of Israel. So because they brought up that question, now we have the I's dotted and the T's crossed. We have some, lacunae? We have some openings there that have to be dealt with. And you shall speak to the children of Israel, saying, so evidently God allowed for a development through the wilderness experience. He allowed for some give and take, some dialogue, question and answer, so that more developments could occur. Because they had committed themselves to continue to obey, not just right then when the law was first given, but later on as more was revealed to them. Okay, so and you shall speak to the children of Israel, saying, if a man dies and has no son, then you shall cause his inheritance to pass to his daughter. If he has no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance to his brother. If he has no brothers, then you shall give, let me go back to verse 9. If he has no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance to his brothers. If he has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to his father's brothers. If his father has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to the relative closest to him in his family, and he shall possess it. And it shall be to the children of Israel as a statute of judgment, just as the Lord commanded Moses. And so that's what happened. So we have that development. Now, this is a time of the year to study wisdom literature, and I want to turn to one bit of wisdom in Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter. You may remember that I recently did a talk on Ecclesiastes, and I want to go to Ecclesiastes 3. And of course, it's become a famous song. Pete Seeger and others, Joan Collins recorded it, and then later on the Byrds made it into a hit, a group called the Byrds. But I want to go to 3:7. Here it says, I'll start in verse 1. To everything there is a season, a time to every purpose under heaven. Now I go to verse 7. A time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. Now, Aaron and Miriam should have been quiet back in Numbers 12. On the other hand, the daughters of Zelophehad were wise in bringing up this matter. And God honored them and their request, and he gave he excuse me, and he named and he gave them an answer. Now let's see a conclusion to this matter. I'm in Numbers 36 now, and you see there's still more to this story. more has to be learned. Now the chief fathers of the families of the children of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, of the families of the sons of Joseph, came near and spoke before Moses and before the leaders, the chief fathers of the children of Israel. There's still one more point that has to be dealt with here. And they said, "The Lord commanded my Lord Moses to give to the land as an inheritance by lot to the children of Israel, and my Lord was commanded by the Lord to give the inheritance of our brothers Zelophehad to his daughters. Now, if they are married to any of the sons of the other tribes of the children of Israel, then their inheritance will be taken from the inheritance of our fathers, and it will be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry, so it will be taken from the lot of our inheritance." Since tribal inheritance goes according to the father, it's a patrilineal system as far as tribal inheritance. So that being the case, if they marry somebody of another tribe, that land is now lost to our tribe. And when the Jubilee of the children of Israel comes, the 50th year when all the land goes back to whom it originally belongs, then their inheritance will be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry. So their inheritance will be taken away from the inheritance of the tribe of our fathers. Then Moses commanded the children of Israel according to the word of the Lord, saying, here's the answer to that. Then Moses commanded the children of Israel according to the word of the Lord. So evidently, once again, he went to God with it. God gave him an answer. Saying, "What the tribe of the sons of Joseph speaks is right." They're also right. The daughters were right, but so are these people right. So what's the answer? "This is what the Lord commands concerning the daughters of Zelophehad, saying, let them marry whom they think best." You see that? Let them marry whom they think best. So they can marry, whoever they want to marry, or whomever they want to marry, I guess. But they may marry only within the family of their father's tribe. Now, I meant to look up the census. It's in the book of Numbers, but there are thousands and thousands of Manassites. So these 5 daughters have a rather large selection of men to choose from within their tribe. I went to a college of about 400 students, and a huge percentage of those students married one another. And that was only in a community of 400. So here you have thousands and thousands. So anyway, let them marry whom they think best, but they may marry only within the family of their father's tribe. So the inheritance of the children of Israel shall not change hands from tribe to tribe, and every one of the children of Israel shall keep the inheritance of the tribe of the fathers. And every daughter who possesses an inheritance in any tribe of the children of Israel shall be the wife of one of the family of her father's tribe, so that the children of Israel each may possess the inheritance of his fathers. So that, now the package is put together. Thus no inheritance shall change hands from one tribe to another, but every tribe of the children of Israel shall keep its own inheritance. Just as the Lord commanded Moses, so did the daughters of Zelophehad. This is so refreshing when you read this account. They asked a question, they got an answer. That created another complication. The answer was given, but people did what they were told, and it all worked out. This is so refreshing because there's so much rebellion in the book of Numbers. Here you have, finally people doing what God says. For Mahlah, Tirzah, Hoglath, Milcah, and Noah, the daughters of Zelophehad were married to the sons of their father's brothers, meaning, they're within the tribe of Manasseh, brother Manassites. They were married into the families of the children of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, and their inheritance remained in the tribe of their father's family. And then we have a final conclusion to the book of Numbers. These are the commandments and the judgments which the Lord commanded the children of Israel by the hand of Moses in the plains of Moab, by the Jordan, across from Jericho. So by now, the people have been conditioned to obey. This is the second generation, and they're not perfect, but they are a more obedient generation than that one that had to die out. And this was the generation that Joshua led across the Jordan to conquer the land. And they did follow Joshua loyally as they had followed Moses. So here you have a very wonderful account of people that asked reasonable questions, and God then answered, and everything worked out. So we do have these 7 women that I've talked about today. I've talked about Tharbis, and much of that was speculation, but reasonable speculation. I spoke of Miriam, and I spoke then of these 5 daughters of Zelophehad, whose names are here in Numbers 27 and then in Numbers 36. So I hope this has been helpful in developing an understanding of the Bible, and how women are often very prominent in biblical accounts. And I want to conclude by going to 2 Corinthians, the 6th chapter. 2 Corinthians, the 6th chapter. And I want to go to verse 18 or so in 2 Corinthians 6. Here, Paul is speaking about promises that God has made to his people. He says to us as his people, I will be a father to you, and you shall be my sons and daughters, says the Lord Almighty. And so God in his kingdom is going to have sons and daughters. And so I thought today it would be appropriate to speak of women in the wilderness. I hope this talk has been helpful and interesting, and will cause you to do further study into these matters. All the best to you and yours.